Welcome back to the Safe Business Agility podcast. We took a short break to brainstorm new ideas to improve the show. But now we're back and excited to bring you new stories, perspectives, and updates about SAFE. Thanks for tuning in. And be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome to this special edition of the Safe Business Agility podcast, featuring in-person conversations captured at the 2022 SAFE Summit.
We needed to move quicker. We needed to make decisions faster. And that's where we decided to make the pivot to Agile.
In today's episode, Josh Burdick, a certified Agile coach and project manager at Chevron, explains how a century-old company shifted its culture to embrace an Agile mindset, make faster decisions, and respond to new markets. We hope you enjoy the show.
Josh, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about what work you do with SAFE and your role within Chevron?
I've been with Chevron for 15 years, and most of that time has been in IT project management as an IT project manager. And about 4 or 5 years ago, we started making the transition to Agile. And so I started to explore the roles of Scrum Master and RTE, and then became an Agile coach, and then became an SPC in 2019. Spent 3 months in Angola training folks in different forms of SAFE and Agile. Spent 1 month in Buenos Aires. As the pandemic was occurring, I was in Kazakhstan. And then ever since then, I've been coaching teams and also doing various teaching of Agile and SAFE. In total, about 80 Agile courses since 2019.
Were you a trainer previous to your work with Agile?
I was not actually. As a project manager, I would be called upon to teach sometimes our project management courses that we had. We did waterfall before, and of course, in the course of being a project manager, part of what I would have to do is help to train and coach the team on how this works and the business leaders and so forth and so on. So, but full-time training like this, I hadn't really done until SAFE.
So about 4 or 5 years ago, you're going Agile, you're starting to think about it. What's going through your head as you're starting to kind of understand what this world is, how it's going to be different? Where'd you even start to look?
Well, at first, when I looked at it as a career project manager, I had some trepidation. Because if you look at the Agile model, the project manager doesn't exist. So I'm looking at a new model to where there goes my career. But the more I looked at it, the more I realized that the way I had done project management is, I always like to say I was Agile before Agile was cool. I would regularly empower my teams. I would leave the details to them. I would make sure that we understand the strategic goals of what the business was looking for, so forth and so on. But I would really allow the teams to refine kind of how they worked and empower them. And that's a key Agile concept right there, is empowering individuals and empowering teams on how they do their work.
So if you're training now, you've been through your own experience of realizing, here's this new model. I don't exist in it. What is my identity? How quickly then do you talk to your students to get over that challenge? Or do you let the students discover on their own and then come to you and say, hey, I'm not sure where I fit? So
we have those questions, and a lot of times we can find them in places. Folks become Scrum Masters, folks become RTEs. A lot of the folks in the business are able to fill the roles of the product owner or the product manager. And the more they see on how this process works of transparency and being able to influence what we develop over time in terms of the backlog and things, they really seem to like the fact that they have such influencing power in the process.
So training 80 classes over the last 2.5, 3 years. Top 5 things that you wish you had known when you started originally.
I wish I had known a little bit more about how we do it IRL, right? In terms of things like non-IT,
Sure.
Right? Because we get a lot of questions about that. And so I've learned a lot more about that from the students themselves. I wish I had a better understanding of the totality of SAFE, because even after 80 courses, you're not going to know everything.
Yeah.
Right. I don't proclaim to know everything. And so there I get information from my students, because when they ask questions, that causes me to think, interesting. And sometimes there's not one right answer.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. And so that's certainly something to take away from that.
Are you working with a lot of non-technology folks right now?
I'm in the IT function at our company. And so mainly we cater towards the IT folks. But when we open up our classes to our Chevron employees, that they can come from kind of any part of the company. And so I will have people from upstream in there. I will have people from manufacturing in there. I'll have people from HR. And they want to know, well, how does this apply to them? And I know that with Agile, historically, we are IT-centric. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the great things that I'm learning about SAFE in this conference is that y'all are trying to really open it up to applying Agile to just about everything we do, which it does apply because transparency and feedback applies to any type of work.
So when do you see that aha moment then for the non-technical folks really understand, hey, this is something that's valuable to me? Talk to me a little bit about their arc from, this is new, I'm not sure, to, wow, I actually want to learn more about this.
When they fully understand the regular cadence, right? When they see that, okay, these teams are going to work in 2-week iterations or sprints. And at the end of those 2 weeks, they're going to do a live demonstration, not a PowerPoint slide, not a set of talking points, but a live demonstration of what they said they were going to do in that time period. And then people are able to give feedback to that and influence the future, right? And then the other takeaway they get from that is we don't get hard-coded into these long-timed roadmaps, right? Historically, what we would do is we'd build a project plan, and they would want a detailed project plan a year and a half out, committing to certain dates and timelines. Well, now, the only thing we commit to is the current time box, whether it's the sprint or the PI. Anything else is forecast, and like the future, it can be changed based upon empirical knowledge and current business needs at that case, and they really like that.
So that's freeing them up, right? It's giving them opportunity to say yes or no, think about where they are.
Exactly, and that's one of the hardest cultural changes to be able to make, especially with regards to individual contributors, is empowering the teams and the individuals to say, no, we don't have the capacity to do that. You come to us with a prioritized list of 15 features for the next PI. Well, we've done PI planning, we've developed our draft plan. We only have the capacity to do the top 10 features, right? And so we're going to have to say, not no permanently, but no, not right now.
So then how do you open up the space for people to have that epiphany in a class? Is it making sure that the PO is there, the PM is there, they have the support of leadership, possibly in other areas saying this is important? Mm-hmm. How do you get folks to accept that this is more than just lip service on a PowerPoint deck?
It's hard. There's where the cultural shift needs to happen, right? And it doesn't happen overnight. So certainly having leadership support, which we do have at Chevron from the upper levels down, and of course they model that behavior. But it's gonna take a while, because when I came into Chevron back in 2007, part of my remit as an experienced hire as a project manager was to build org capability around waterfall project management. And we did a really good journey for the next 8 to 10 years of getting to above world-class performance in project management. But we realized around 2017, 2018, that the digital imperatives, the digital transformation, how fast the world was moving, so forth and so on, we needed to move quicker. We needed to make decisions faster. And that's where we decided to make the pivot to Agile. So we're only 4 or 5 years into this journey, and turning the ship around, it's going to take a while, but people understand that and are open to that, and our leaders understand that.
What do you think is giving them the agency to be open to this? What is their pressure that is causing them to put the effort into this?
It's just the current world that we're in. Chevron has been around for well over 100 years, and there's no guarantee that we'll be around for the next 100 years. There's a lot of competition. We have changing, imperatives in terms of the environmental, carbon neutral, things like that. And the idea is that we need to be able to be responsive to these changing business needs and business conditions a lot quicker than we used to in the past. And so that's one of the reasons why they've really opened to this change.
So for yourself as a leader at the very front of this discussion with them, once they go through the course, they interact with you, they learn something new, they go back to their daily work. How are you then making sure that they are continuing their learning, coming back to you with questions? Because it's only 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, right, out of their life that they're getting this.
Yep.
How do you keep that momentum moving forward?
Well, I use these classes as a vehicle to get them excited about Agile. and the Agile mindset and SAFe. And what I'm introducing to them is not a rule book of you have to do it this way, so forth and so on. I'm opening you up to some of the best practices that come from around the world and which are constantly evolving. If there's an Agile book, I own it. And I have a stack of books, and I will hold up books during the class and I will show them this. And I will say, if you want to read more about it, take a look at this. I want them to get excited and go down the rabbit hole like I did and a lot of my colleagues did, and start your own journey onto finding out on how to apply this. And then also, of course, we have other coaches at Chevron, and we have experienced RTEs and Scrum Masters and things. And so I encourage them to work with their respective RTEs and Scrum Masters to find out what they need to do. But also feel free to come to me. Since I've been doing it remote, we've used Microsoft Teams. And so the chat for the class remains long after the class is done. I said, so let me know when you've gotten certified. Let's celebrate that. And then feel free to come to me, feel free to come to my colleagues, and run stuff by me, right? Hey, we're doing this. We're thinking about doing a weighted shortest job first. What do you think? And I'll say, hey, you know what? You're on the right path. Keep going. Or, hey, this is something that you might want to think about, right? Rather than, well, you have to do this.
Yeah, I think we run into that problem, right?
Yep.
At times, people think it's prescriptive. They have to be it by the book, but it is adaptable.
Yep.
You do have to find the way that works for your organization.
Mm-hmm.
Every organization has their own culture
mm-hmm.
and their own way of working.
Yep.
So we can't displace that with SAFe only.
Yep.
So then as a trainer,
mm-hmm.
with the amount of knowledge you have, when did you start feeling comfortable being able to break away from, I have to train you to make sure you get certified, to, I know I'm going to give you enough information
mm-hmm.
and I can start adapting this to our way of work? How long did that take?
Well, for me, it was almost immediately because, they sent me to Angola, and Angola is a different environment to where, the folks that live there, have had, a history of political turmoil and civil war and things like that. And they have certain issues with the infrastructure still, electricity and stuff like that. So the people that work there, they have a sense of kind of what's really important versus just what's not as important. And so by being able to talk with them and them to be my first real audience in this, they helped me to feel more comfortable as to what really applies and makes sense. And knowing that they can change it for their particular environment, for their particular needs, and they responded to that well. And so I just took that ethos from wherever I went ever since then.
So I think you're ahead of the curve a little bit as the way that you think about SAFe and the way that you're adapting SAFe in the organization. 4 to 5 years in, yes, you're at the beginning of it still, but you're more mature than some. How then are you using the materials that we're creating as a company outside of the training specifically mm-hmm. to help foster that transformation?
I've been introducing them to SAFe Collaborate. So that's something that I do with some of the Scrum Masters that I work with, and be able to say, hey, look, here's an option. If you're doing some brainstorming, pruning the tree, for example, right? Feel free to use this if you don't have another tool that you're using. Some of the measurement tools that y'all have, right? The agility measurement tools. I'm excited about what y'all are doing with regard to benchmarking, KPIs, to where we can see, well, where are we doing pretty good at, but where do we need some improvement, right? Because there's always something to improve. What I tell folks is we're never going to achieve perfection, but what we want is we want our 5th iteration to be better than our 1st iteration, and we want our 10th iteration to be better than our 5th iteration. And the same thing with the PI as well.
Do you see, when you're thinking about leading and lagging indicators, the leading indicator is the change of behavior and the way people feel about work? The lagging indicator is the work that's getting done? Or is it the other way around?
I would think that the first example, right? You start to see kind of the changes in the way people are responding to this, but then, there's always still a struggle of, well, we've got, how do we do our portfolio management, right? And are we working on the right things? And how are we doing a better job of prioritizing to where we have more dedicated teams? And there's something I think that we've made progress in. Rather than having people spread among 3 and 4 Agile teams, which is what typically happens, even if you're not doing Agile, people usually get spread too thin. And so the idea is trying to get more dedicated teams and to prioritize the most high priority things that we need to work on rather than trying to do it all, because we can't do it all. SAFe says we can't do it all. Life says we can't do it all.
So speaking of doing it all, if you're reading a lot of Agile books, you're living in the Agile world, where else are you looking for inspiration or thinking about, the things that make you better as a trainer or better as a leader? Where else are you looking outside of Agile specifically?
I try to listen to different podcasts if I can, watch TED Talks. I follow different folks on LinkedIn, and sometimes they'll share some kind of knowledge. But then the other thing that I do is I have 20-something years experience doing waterfall project management and working with many different companies, different deployments and things. And so I know the weak spots that we tend to have with large deployments, with interacting with people and such, in waterfall. And Agile isn't a silver bullet. But I understand what the weak spots are with waterfall and how Agile can solve some of these problems that are inherent in large changes that we're trying to do. Because we're still dealing with human beings, right? We haven't fully gone to the metaverse yet, kind of thing.
Yeah, we're not plugged in fully yet.
Yeah, so some folks would say, well, you've got all this waterfall experience, so how can you do Agile? Well, I can use that experience as a touching off point to be able to say, well, this is how I can improve, because Agile will bring us to there.
As we're wrapping up, because I know that you've got to get back to a session, I'm just curious, as you mentor trainers and you're talking to them and you're giving them advice, what advice are you giving them, and what could you leave our audience with to make them feel more comfortable, or possibly train their first course, or maybe they've trained 100 of them and they're still looking for interesting ways to do better?
Number one, I tell them to just keep it simple, right? Because there's a bunch of stuff that you can do with your class, right? Sometimes folks get a little lost with all the shiny objects. So keep it simple. Focus on the fundamentals of the material. Make sure your students are engaged by asking them questions. Try to get them to participate in the activities and things. But don't make the activities so arduous to where it takes you half an hour to explain how it works. And that's part of the simplicity, right? So that would be my key takeaway, is to keep it simple and know that your first few classes aren't going to be perfect. But over time, you're just going to build up that core capability of being able to do this, and it gets better.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for taking a few minutes with us.
Absolutely.
I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, and we look forward to hearing more about your success in the future.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to our show today. Be sure to check out the show notes and revisit past episodes at scaledagile.com/podcast. Relentless improvement is in our DNA, and we welcome your suggestions for the show. If you have something to share, send us an email at podcast@scaledagile.com.